The first unusual sign came before sunrise, a low, rolling rumble echoing across the edge of the clearing, interrupted by the soft rustle of dry grass. At the edge of her porch, she noticed a shadow flicker, a large golden shape lying motionless near the gate. Her breath caught. It was Mara, the pregnant lioness she had helped only days before, her sides heaving with quiet exertion. The morning air was crisp, scented with dew and distant wildflowers, and the light brushed the trees in delicate strokes of gold and amber. Mara lifted her head slowly, ears twitching at every whisper of wind, every snapping twig. She was alert but exhausted, her coat matted in places from the trek back through the forest. As she shifted, a soft whine escaped her throat, a sound that was both warning and plea. Before she could move closer, other shapes emerged from the periphery, lions. One by one, more of them appeared, circling the yard with measured, cautious steps. Their eyes, amber and liquid in the early light, were fixed on her with a strange intensity. She froze, heart hammering, unsure whether to reach for Mara or retreat. The herd's approach was quiet, yet unmistakably deliberate. She noticed the young males at the rear, smaller cubs following cautiously, their tiny paws barely disturbing the earth. The adult lions moved with a strength and calm that seemed almost ceremonial. Every tail flick, every lowered head, carried a message she could not fully interpret, but she sensed it was gratitude. Mara shifted toward her, pressing her nose gently against the wooden railing as if to say, "Thank you." The lioness's gaze met hers, and in that moment, the distance between human and wild dissolved. She whispered softly, "It's okay, you're safe now." Her voice was almost swallowed by the morning, but the sound seemed to ease the tension in the circle of lions. For nearly an hour, she observed the pride as they lingered near the house, watching her as much as she watched them. One of the older males stepped forward, pawing gently at the earth near the porch. He lowered his massive head, ears flat, in a gesture of trust that made her chest tighten. Mara followed suit, rolling onto her side in a display of comfort, her cubs tumbling around her like warm shadows. The forest beyond remained silent, the usual chorus of birds and insects waiting for the lion's departure. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and the lingering trace of lion musk. She noted the subtle interactions, the nuzzle of a cub against its mother, the brushing of fur between siblings, the careful, protective glances of the adults. Eventually, as sunlight pooled into soft golden puddles across the yard, the lions began to move back toward the forest. One by one, they walked into the trees, their bodies fading into the dappled light. Mara lingered at the gate a moment longer, her eyes meeting the woman's once again, before she turned and followed the others, paws silent on the soft earth. She stepped back onto the porch, shoulders releasing the tension she hadn't realized she was holding. The yard felt empty and alive all at once, echoing with the memory of weight and warmth. The wind stirred the leaves, carrying with it a quiet acknowledgement of a bond formed without words, a gratitude felt in shared space, in respect, in trust. As the forest swallowed the final figures, she stood in the glow of late morning, the moment etched into her memory. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a small, unguarded smile. The lions had left, but the connection lingered, a subtle pulse of life and loyalty that would remain with her long after their shadows disappeared among the trees. The first sign came at dawn, a faint, irregular groan carried on the cool morning air. Among the tall grasses near the riverbank, a golden shape lay trembling. Its flanks rose and fell unevenly, a subtle shiver running through her as she approached. It was Mara, the lioness she had once glimpsed from a distance, now clearly struggling, her pregnancy weighing heavily on her. The sunlight filtered through the mist, dusting the dew-laden grass in sparkling silver. The scent of wet earth mixed with the sharp tang of river water, and somewhere a bird called, a hesitant trill that seemed to hold its breath in the quiet tension. She knelt slowly, careful not to startle Mara, reaching out with steady hands. The lioness lifted her head just enough to meet her gaze, eyes wide, wary, and pained. Mara's breathing was labored, shallow gasps betraying the strength it took to lie still. She could see the thin, almost skeletal lines along Mara's flanks, the subtle twitch of her ears at every distant sound. The cub within Mara moved restlessly, pressing against her, and the lioness let out a low, mournful whine. It's okay, Mara. You're safe," she whispered, the words barely louder than a breeze. Mara's eyes softened fractionally, a small, almost imperceptible gesture of trust. The woman's hands hovered above her coat, sensing warmth but careful to avoid sudden movements. She fetched clean water from a nearby stream, letting it trickle into a shallow depression in the soil. Mara drank cautiously, her tongue grazing the water with gentle laps. Hours passed, and she stayed near, observing every movement, every sigh. Mara's body trembled less as the sun climbed higher, the golden light washing over her tawny fur. The woman gathered soft leaves and branches to create a resting place, careful not to confine the lioness but to give her a sense of comfort and safety. The cub inside Mara shifted again, pressing against her side, and the lioness purred, a low, vibrating sound that seemed almost accidental in its quiet relief. By late afternoon, Mara had lifted her head, surveying the surroundings with cautious curiosity. The woman spoke softly, more to reassure herself than the lioness. "We'll get through this, together." The golden coat glimmered in the dappled sunlight, each muscle beneath visible and tense, yet her eyes held a fragile hope. As twilight approached, the first stars appearing faintly in the sky, Mara rolled onto her side, exposing her belly to the cooling earth. The woman stayed nearby, sensing the small miracle in the making, life growing inside Mara, vulnerable yet tenacious. A gentle breeze stirred the grasses, carrying away the faint odors of river mud and wildflowers, creating a quiet sanctuary for the lioness. When night finally settled, Mara rested, breathing easier, her head on the soft pile of leaves. The woman remained just a few paces away, listening to the rhythmic rise and fall of the lioness's chest. She realized, as she watched the golden shape beneath the stars, that the trust between them had deepened, silent, mutual, and fragile. Mara had accepted her presence not with demand, but with cautious acknowledgement, an unspoken gratitude that only wild creatures could convey. As she rose to leave, the faint rustle of Mara's tail against the leaves seemed to echo a promise. They would meet again, not as stranger and stranger, but as allies in the quiet survival of life itself. The unusual sound reached her before she even saw him. A low, hesitant growl carried across the dusty clearing. At the edge of the path, a golden shape emerged. A lion, massive and lean, his paw caught in a crude snare. Blood had stained the fur around the injury, and each step he took was careful, painful. The morning air carried the earthy scent of crushed leaves and wild herbs, mingling with the faint coppery tang of blood. Birds scattered noisily from nearby trees, their calls sharp against the quiet tension. She approached slowly, noting how the lion's amber eyes tracked her every movement, flickering with a mix of fear, pain, and, strangely, recognition. He lowered himself to the ground, dragging the trapped paw, muscles taut with effort. Every breath was shallow, uneven, and punctuated by soft, guttural whines. She knelt a few paces away, offering calm, steady presence rather than words. "It's okay, we'll get you free," she murmured, letting the sound blend with the wind. The lion shifted slightly, eyes never leaving hers. His low growls softened into tentative moans, almost as if he understood that help was coming. She fetched a length of cloth and approached cautiously, careful to avoid sudden movements that could worsen the injury. The leather of the snare had cut deep, and she noted the dirt and blood crusted along the edges. For several tense minutes, she worked quietly, untangling the twisted metal with practiced care. The lion's muscles twitched with every movement, a mixture of pain and restraint. When the last loop of the snare came free, he hesitated, then stepped back, shaking the paw slowly, as if testing its strength. She let out a quiet sigh of relief, her hands stained with blood but steady. The lion sniffed at her hands, then at the air around her, as if searching for meaning in the interaction. He lowered his head in what seemed like gratitude, the motion deliberate but restrained. A rustle from the forest revealed Mara nearby, her cubs hidden in the undergrowth. Her gaze flicked between the two, calm and measured, aware of the human's role in this fragile encounter. As he limped toward the shade, the lion paused, glancing back at her once more. The subtle nod of his massive head felt like acknowledgement, a wordless understanding passing between species. The forest seemed to exhale around them, the wind brushing through the branches, leaves rustling softly, carrying away tension and carrying with it the fragile bond forged in quiet care. When she finally stepped back, the lion moved beside Mara, nudging her gently before settling in the shade. The cubs emerged slowly, circling their mother as they explored the clearing. The woman watched, chest tight with emotion, knowing she had witnessed more than rescue. She had earned trust, been recognized not as a threat but as a presence worth allowing near. The sun climbed higher, gilding the forest edge in warm light. The lion rested his paw on the ground, Mara beside him, and the cubs sprawled around in a tangle of golden fur. She stood quietly, letting the moment sink in, the silent gratitude, the fragile peace, the knowledge that her intervention had changed lives without a word spoken. Finally, she turned to leave, feeling the weight of the forest's eyes on her. The lions did not follow, but their presence lingered, etched into the quiet around her. She carried that weight forward, the knowledge that sometimes trust was earned not in command, but in stillness, in respect, in gentle persistence. The first sign came with the rustling of leaves at dusk. Shadows moved along the edge of the forest, large and deliberate, a slow, rhythmic pattern that made her pause mid-step. Mara emerged first, her golden coat catching the fading light, followed by the lion with the healed paw. Behind them, more shapes appeared, silhouettes of adult lions and cubs, each moving with careful coordination, the pride expanding in quiet procession. The air smelled of damp earth and fallen leaves, tinged with the musk of lion fur. Crickets chirped softly, the sound oddly muted under the weight of so many creatures pressing closer. She remained on the porch, frozen yet calm, her eyes tracing the graceful arcs of their movement. The lions stopped just beyond the yard, forming a loose semicircle, watching her with an intensity that was neither threatening nor timid. Mara stepped forward, nudging a small cub into place, as if ensuring the young ones maintained their positions. The healed lion approached more slowly, pawing gently at the ground before settling near Mara. Their movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial, a silent choreography of trust and recognition. She knelt slowly, hands resting lightly on her knees. "It's okay, we won't hurt you," she whispered, letting the words float into the evening air. The lion's ears twitched, tail swishing, but they remained where they were, attentive yet patient. The cubs watched her with curious eyes, tiny paw pads brushing against the soft soil. She noticed the subtle signs, the flick of a tail, the lowered heads, the soft moans, and felt the weight of a bond forming, unspoken but tangible. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of amber and violet, she brought out water in shallow bowls. The lions drank cautiously, muscles tense, ears rotating at every distant sound, yet they did not flee. Mara lingered, nuzzling a cub, eyes flicking back to her with unmistakable acknowledgement. The other adults followed suit, each movement deliberate, careful, respectful. Night settled slowly, bringing a cool hush over the yard. Stars began to appear, faintly glittering above the dark canopy of trees. The lions remained near, forming a quiet perimeter around her home. Their presence was protective, not invasive, a shield made of trust, patience, and shared experience. She moved slowly inside, leaving the door open, aware of their gaze following her. The pride did not move, did not make a sound beyond soft, occasional purrs and sighs. Their bodies rested in the moonlight, taut and graceful, a living mosaic of gold and shadow. In that silence, she understood the depth of their gratitude. Not in gestures she could control, not in words, but in the quiet acknowledgement of care returned. The lions had chosen to stay near her, circling and waiting, not demanding, simply honoring the connection forged in gentleness and respect. As the night deepened, she sat by the doorway, eyes on the pride. The air carried the scent of damp soil, wildflowers, and fur, mingling in a memory she would never forget. The forest seemed to hold its breath, leaving only the quiet pulse of life shared between human and wild, a bond written in trust, patience, and the soft, unspoken language of gratitude. The first unusual sound came at first light, a soft chorus of low growls, gentle and rhythmic, carrying across the misted yard. She stepped onto the porch, her breath visible in the cool morning air, and froze. Mara lay at the edge of the yard, cubs huddled against her, while the rest of the pride fanned out in a semicircle, golden bodies pressed against the rising sun's warmth. The forest beyond shimmered with dew, leaves sparkling in delicate hues of amber and green. Birds chirped hesitantly, aware of the quiet ceremony unfolding. The scent of wet earth and wild musk filled the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of crushed wildflowers. She stayed perfectly still, letting the moment stretch, honoring the fragile trust she had earned. Mara lifted her head slowly, eyes locking with hers. The subtle tilt of the lioness's ears, the gentle twitch of her tail, all spoke of recognition and gratitude. A low, rolling purr rose from Mara's throat, almost imperceptible, yet it carried across the space between human and wild as a gesture of thanks. The cubs tumbled gently around her, rubbing against her legs in playful curiosity, their small bodies warm and soft. The adult lions began to move, one by one, stepping gracefully into the forest. Each step was measured, deliberate, a dance of patience and respect. The healed lion paused briefly, lowering his massive head toward her as if to say goodbye, then followed Mara's lead. The cubs hesitated, tumbling after their mother in the soft carpet of grass, paws making barely a sound. She knelt and whispered, "Go, be free," letting the words drift like the morning mist. Mara and the others responded with a final, gentle look, a silent farewell. The rustling of leaves and the soft padding of paws filled the space for a few precious minutes, then all was still, the yard suddenly emptier yet resonant with memory. The sun climbed higher, scattering light across the wooden porch, warming her shoulders and illuminating the faint impressions where the lions had rested. She walked slowly among them, imagining the warmth of their bodies, the quiet rhythm of their breathing, the trust they had placed in her hands. The air carried the faint trace of musk, wild and alive, a lingering reminder of their presence. Birds took flight, and the forest seemed to sigh, as if acknowledging the end of this shared moment. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the sense and the memory of golden eyes, soft purrs, and the careful, respectful gestures of a pride that had chosen to honor her care. By mid-morning, the yard was empty, sunlight pooling across the grass, leaves shimmering in gold. She remained on the porch, shoulders relaxed but chest heavy with the weight of the encounter. The lions had left, yet their presence lingered in every rustle of wind, every distant call of a bird, every memory etched in her mind. It was a quiet, poetic goodbye, one written not in words or grand gestures, but in trust, patience, and shared survival. And though the pride had returned to the wild, she carried their gratitude with her, an invisible pulse of life, loyalty, and connection that would remain long after their shadows disappeared into the forest.